This morning I find myself in Wells, the smallest city in England. This is the church of St Cuthbert's, the largest parish church building in Somerset. This beautiful Gothic church is so impressive that visitors often mistake it for the cathedral. Wells is situated in the county of Somerset, on the southern edge of the Mendip Hills, with the mystic Somerset Levels stretching away to the south and west. Although Wells only contains about 12,000 inhabitants, Wells has had city status since medieval times, because of the presence of Wells Cathedral. The city remains remarkably unspoilt, and has an eclectic mix of historic buildings and narrow streets, which all reflect on the continuing development of the city throughout the ages. The history of Wells goes right back to Roman times, when we know there was a settlement, probably because of the springs that bubble up here. Wells gets its name from these springs, which can today be found in the gardens of the Bishop's Palace. The marketplace has been a focal point of the city over the ages, and still is today, with a twice-weekly market on Wednesdays and Saturdays, selling local produce and goods. Twice a year a fun fair is held, together with other lively activities such as the annual charity boule competition. Mary Rand, who was a resident of Wells, achieved a world record in the long jump at the 1964 Olympic Games. A commemorative plaque showing the actual distance can be found in the pavement. There is also an unusual medieval freshwater conduit. Two medieval gateways are located on the marketplace, known as Penniless Porch and the Bishop's Eye. The post office is located here. The town hall is very much a hub of the community, covering an eclectic range of events and functions. As well as being used for council meetings, the town hall hosts many public and private occasions, such as music concerts, balls and craft fairs. Weddings and civil partnerships regularly take place, and a wide variety of clubs and societies meet here, including a yoga and a gardening club. There is a Mendip information point and a citizens' advice bureau within the town hall. Bluebird Care is also housed here, and there is also a coroner's court that takes place regularly. I've got some cousins who used to live in Wells many years ago, so back in those days I used to visit this city quite often. And it's nice to be back. I'd forgotten how nice Wells is. From the marketplace, I walked through one of the medieval gateways, where I would find myself walking to the city's most famous landmark. Built between 1175 and 1490, Wells Cathedral has been described as the most poetic of the English cathedrals. Wells is the earliest English cathedral to be built in the Gothic style and has an international reputation. The current building is an important landmark in Somerset and the southwest. As well as its iconic west front, Wells Cathedral has unique features that separate it from other English cathedrals, including the beautiful scissor arches supporting the central tower, a structure which was added in 1338 after the weight of a new spire on top of the tower threatened to collapse the whole thing. The cathedral houses one of the largest collections of historic stained glass in the country. Experts agree that the Jesse window at Wells Cathedral is one of the most splendid examples of 14th century stained glass in Europe, narrowly escaping destruction during the English Civil War. The cathedral also boasts the famous Wells clock, considered to be the second oldest clock mechanism in Great Britain, as well as the fascinating octagonal chapter house, and one of only 4 chained libraries in the UK. I walked over to look at another gateway, which is on Sadler Street. This is Brown's Gatehouse, also known as the Dean's Eye, built around 1451 by Bishop Thomas Beckington. It is named after the shoemaker Richard Brown, who was the next-door tenant in 1553. Next to the cathedral is Vicars Close, believed to be the only complete medieval street left in England. This important landmark was designed to provide communal accommodation for the Vicars choral, who sang daily worship within the cathedral. This centuries-old tradition continues today and is a unique and much valued part of life at Wells Cathedral. The houses of the close were built in the 14th century under direction from Bishop Ralph of Shrewsbury, and the iconic chimneys were added in the 15th century. Originally 42 houses were built, one for each vicar, but some were combined following the Reformation when vicars were allowed to marry. Today the close comprises 27 residences, a chapel, library, treasury and muniment room. There is also a dining hall connected to the cathedral by a covered walkway, the Chain Gate Bridge. Reflecting the significance of the close, all its buildings are Grade 1 listed. The current occupants still include all 12 men of the Vicars Choral, plus the organists and vergers. Vicars Choral have remained at the heart of life at Wells Cathedral since the 1100s and are now recognised as a world-class choir. I think the very first time I ever came to Wells would have been when my cousins, who I mentioned earlier, first moved to the area. I do remember attending Elaine's wedding. She was one of my cousins and she got married in nearby Shepton Mallet. And we actually went to the wedding there, and I think, if I recall correctly, the reception would have been there too. But I'm sure Elaine would have first moved to Wells around that time. Back at the marketplace, I walked through the Bishop's Eye gateway, leading me to the Bishop's Palace. This wonderful medieval palace has been the home of the Bishops of Bath and Wells for over 800 years. Within the fortified palace walls lie the ruin of the Great Hall, the Bishop's private chapel and 14 acres of gardens, including an arboretum, community garden and garden of reflection. The palace has been designated by English Heritage as a Grade 1 listed building. It was originally surrounded by a medieval deer park. When the walls were built, streams were diverted to form the moat as a reservoir. In the 1820s, the grounds within the walls were planted and laid out as pleasure grounds by Bishop George Henry Law, who created a reflecting pond near the springs. Parts of the buildings are still used as a residence by the current bishop. However, much of the palace is now used for public functions and as a tourist attraction. Well, that's a little bit of Wells. Time to move on now. Leaving Wells, I travelled 6 miles along the A39 to my next destination. I arrived in the town of Glastonbury, which is situated on the low-lying Somerset levels. In times gone by, this part of Somerset was flooded in winter by a marshy sea. In summer, the water levels would fall, allowing settlers to move about more freely and graze their animals. The inhabitants of this region became known as the Summer People, hence the county name Somerset. It was in this marshland, on a sector of higher, drier ground, that Glastonbury sprang up. The town has been identified with the legendary Isle of Avalon, where King Arthur is said to be buried. These stories and the region's spiritual ambience have led to the town becoming something of a centre for the New Age religion. The town contains many interesting old buildings, such as the Abbey, the Tribunal, the George Hotel and the Pilgrim's Inn. The Church of St John the Baptist dates from the 15th century. The Somerset Rural Life Museum is housed in the old Tithe Barn. Today, Glastonbury lives on as a tourist attraction, the ancient buildings and unique atmosphere continuing to draw visitors from all over the world. The legendary visit of Joseph of Arimathea, who is supposed to have planted his staff in the ground, which then miraculously flowered into the Glastonbury Holy Thorn, continues to draw pilgrims and curiosity seekers. The world's largest music event, the Glastonbury Festival, is held each year 6 miles east in the village of Pilton. Going back to my cousin Elaine, the day she got married was also the very first time I came to Glastonbury as well. Now her new husband's family came from Glastonbury. I think it was his parents that lived here. So after we had the wedding and reception in Shepton Mallet, we came here to John's parents here in Glastonbury. And I think they were named Barbara and Benji. It was time for me to visit my final location of the day, so from the town centre I climbed up a path towards the place I was especially looking forward to seeing today. Well, this is one of the main reasons I've come to Glastonbury today. Glastonbury Tor. Glastonbury Tor is one of the most famous landmarks in Somerset, if not the whole of the West Country. It's not just famous because it can be seen for miles and miles around, but also because it has huge spiritual significance for many people. Its pagan beliefs are still very much celebrated, and it is a beautiful place to walk, unwind and relax. The conical shape of Glastonbury Tor is natural. Thousands of years ago it was an island. Before modern drainage, the Tor in winter would have towered above the flooded Somerset levels. The terracing on the hillside has been dated to Neolithic times, around the same time as when Stonehenge was constructed. It has been suggested that the terraces form a kind of maze that guided pilgrims up the sacred hill. I stopped to look at the superb views of the Somerset levels, Dorset, Wiltshire and Wales that this iconic and evocative landmark offers. The top of the Tor was levelled at some point in the 10th or 11th century to build a large stone church. This was destroyed in a powerful earthquake in 1275 and rebuilt in 1323. It lasted until the death of the abbey at Henry VIII's hands in 1539. The church was quarried for stone and now only the tower remains. Inside there is a plaque showing the history of the Tor. Glastonbury Tor is now owned and cared for by the National Trust, and there is free access to the public at all times. So there you are, Glastonbury Tor, a wonderful place to end my tour here in Glastonbury.